Hi, my name is Ted Kolberg. I'm a fifth-year graduate student from the University of Notre Dame in Indiana in the U.S. and I work here at CERN on the CMS experiment.
Hi Ted, can you tell us a little bit more about what your work involves?
Yeah, our institution is involved in a number of different projects, but my advisor and I are primarily working on 3 projects that are related to the CMS electromagnetic calorimeter, or ECAL as we call it for short. The first of these projects is monitoring the status of the off-detector electronics boards. So the detector is sort of like a big camera with all these different channels. And in order to read out those channels, we have to have a bunch of sort of electronic hardware sitting in a cavern next to the detector that's taking the signals coming off the detector and turning it into usable data that we can analyze on the computer. In order to make sure that this whole system is functioning properly, we have a software package which monitors any sort of errors or alarms or things like that which are raised by the electronics in the course of taking data. And by monitoring these things, it helps us to ensure that the quality of the data we're taking is good. Then once we have that data, we need to reconstruct it into the particles that were causing these signals in our detector. And that's where the second project that I work on comes in. The photons, which come out of collisions in CMS, deposit their energy in the electromagnetic calorimeter. And in order to reconstruct a sort of usable analysis object that we can make our analysis on, we need to reconstruct the signals from the calorimeter into the physics object, the photon. And so we do that by applying various sorts of software routines to the objects that we get out of the detector to ensure that it's a photon and not some other particle that might fake a photon and confuse us in our analysis. So part of my job is making sure that all the software that does this photon reconstruction is working properly. Then once we have the photons, we want to do some sort of physics measurement with them. And so the third thing that I'm working on is a potential PhD thesis topic. I hope to do my thesis sometime in the next couple of years as soon as we have enough data coming from the detector to do it. And so I want to measure the photons that are produced from QCD interactions when the 2 protons collide and the various constituent particles inside of them give rise to a photon. This tells us something about the structure of the proton at the very high energies that we've never achieved before that we'll get from the LHC. But it's also, photons produced in this way are a background to other more interesting searches for physics with photons, like the Higgs boson or supersymmetry. In order to understand if we've seen those things, we need to understand the known processes first and how often they're occurring. So those are the 3 main areas in which I spend my time here.
So you're studying for a PhD. What's your background and how did your interest in photons come about?
I studied physics for 4 years at Stanford University in California, and when I graduated I applied to graduate school at Notre Dame, and so I've been studying there since. And I guess one of the main things that I took from my earlier education was some knowledge about computer programming, which has turned out to be really useful for me in my studies here.
Okay, so what would a usual day look like for you? Is it hands-on experimental or is it more to do with computers?
Well, at this point, all of the hardware for our part of the experiment is installed in the cavern and basically functioning properly. So I spend almost all my time working with the software for the experiment. So most of the time I'm just sitting at the desk in my office writing computer code. Although sometimes my job requires me to go and be on shift for the experiment over in Chassis. So we get in the car and drive to the control room and monitor the functioning of the experiment from there.
So how long have you been at CERN?
I first came to CERN in 2006 to work on test beams for the ECAL. This was before we'd assembled it and put it into the cavern, and we still had, they're called super modules, but basically 1/36 of the whole ECAL we had out, and we were putting electrons into it from a test beam here at CERN, and this helped us to calibrate the detector and understand its functionality before we installed it. So I worked on that for a while, and then I went back to my home institute to take some courses. And now I've been spending most of my time here for the last 2 years.
And do you expect to stay here longer?
Yeah, I'll probably stay for the next year at least, or until I have data to write my thesis.
I imagine you're enjoying your studies here at CERN. Why is that?
Well, first of all, it's a really exciting place to be here on sort of the eve of the startup of the LHC. We don't really know what's going to come out of our experiment when we first get beams from the accelerator, so it's really fun to be here at such an interesting time in the life of the experiment and get to feel some of the excitement of doing a new thing for the first time. Another reason that I really like it here is that CERN's a very sort of international and collegial atmosphere where you get lots of friends who are from other countries, from other universities, working on other physics experiments, or even people that work on completely different kinds of things at CERN, people that just work on in the computer section here, for example. And so it's a lot of fun to get to mix with all those people and become friends with people you never would have met if you weren't lucky enough to be stationed here.
So how did you manage to come and study at CERN?
Well, my advisor suggested that I come here because one of the most important parts of high energy physics is getting to do some of the hands-on work of making the detector operate. You can do the physics analysis from home or anywhere that has an internet connection, but you want to really participate in the life of the experiment and get a chance to go and take shifts and lay hands on the hardware and so forth. And so unless you come to CERN, you don't have as much of an opportunity to do that. But even people that are based at their home institutes most of the time still make frequent trips out here. So most people get at least some of that experience.
So are you sending data back to your colleagues in Notre Dame?
Yeah, that's right. So because of this grid computing that we have set up, once we take the data here at CERN, it gets put to computer centers all around the world so that physicists working from their home institutes can access it from there. Or even me, when I'm sitting in my office at CERN, I still end up sending computer jobs that run in Italy and California and Taiwan, because there's no single disk anywhere that's big enough to hold all the data. We need to distribute it all over the place.
So what are you expecting to find over the next few years?
Well, I'm hoping that we find something that we don't expect. There are lots of predictions as far as what might happen, and most of these predictions are just speculative. So we have no real data to tell us what we're going to find at this new energy scale. So the most exciting thing would be to find something that no one has thought of before. So that's what I'm rooting for.
So how does living in Geneva differ to living in Indiana?
Well, Geneva's a pretty nice city. There's a lot of different things to do and a lot of interesting people there. I would say one downside of the city is that I was spending the same amount to rent an entire house with a garage and a backyard that I'm paying for a little apartment now. But even that being said, I enjoy Geneva a lot, and especially during the summertime, it's quite beautiful. You go down by the lake or go swimming or whatever. It's a very nice place to spend time.
And what kind of things do you do with your friends?
Well, my friends and I enjoy cooking a lot, so we like experimenting with new recipes and trying out new dishes, which is nice because it's tough to afford going out to eat all the time in Geneva, so it has that side benefit. And we also like going to see music quite a bit, so if any bands we like are in the area, we'll try to make a trip to go see them.
It sounds as though you're really enjoying your time here at CERN. What would you recommend to other young scientists wishing to come and work here?
Well, I would say you want to get a good education in physics or computers, or preferably both. That'll come in handy. Take French classes, because you'll find that to be useful if you ever come here. And I would just urge anyone who has a little bit of interest to think about coming here, because it's a very exciting experiment, and we're going to be going through a couple of really exciting couple of years. So if you have the chance, I think you should go for it.
Ted, thank you ever so much for sharing your experiences with us. It's been really interesting talking to you. Thank you.